Welcome everybody to GoLocal Live. I'm Josh Fenton, CEO and co-founder. Let's jump to a quick number of headlines. First off, the FTC action against a Rhode Island company is getting more and more attention. GoLocal broke a story this weekend, and also Mr. Ponte's reaction to the FTC's action against his company. Now CBS News has picked up on the story. You can read all about it on GoLocal Live. If you haven't heard it, you must have. Tom Brady got into trouble for playing football or catch at a Tampa Bay park and got kicked out in violation of the quarantine. See, they're not as nice to you down there in Florida as we were to you in New England. We would have given you a park up here. Rest of the day, stay tuned. We're going to have our daily broadcast with Dr. Michael Fine. He'll be on at 12 noon, 1 o'clock for the governor, and 3 o'clock political scientist extraordinaire, University of Virginia professor Jennifer Lawless, always a bastion of insights into what's going on nationally in the world of politics. Let's go to our friend Zach Levesque from Northpointe. Zach, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Excellent. Let's go right to it. Let's talk about the housing market. Lots of news developing these days. Let's start with, what are you seeing from a business standpoint? Who's knocking on your door, and what are they looking for from Northpointe?
Well, right now we're still in a little bit of a refinance boom. It's a pocket. Interest rates have went down dramatically over the last couple of months, having to do with obviously the pandemic, the stock market being hit. So the 10-year Treasury has dipped to very, very low, almost historic lows, which is in turn lower interest rates. So we're seeing a lot of refinance applications. What we're not seeing as much of is the purchase applications. And we've talked about this before on the show. The pandemic, we all knew it was going to affect the market. It actually didn't affect the market as much as we had thought in Rhode Island in March. But we're starting to go into that time where we're going to see contracts to buy new homes start to dwindle.
And will that be in part because I'm held up in my house? I don't want anybody touring my house. I can't even, realtors can't even show it other than virtually. I don't have any place I can go move to. And so there's just not a lot of supply.
Yeah, there's always a lot of factors. The first factor is, to your point, on the home side. If you're selling a house, you don't want anybody in your house. We've talked about how mortgage guidelines have changed recently to combat this fear and to also keep home buyers and home sellers safe. Most of the transactions we're doing do not require interior pictures of a house if they're selling it. So an appraiser can do an appraisal without going inside the home. So it does protect people. So there are some things in place to protect home buyers and home sellers, but compound that fear with the fact that people are afraid of losing their job. People are afraid of what's happening to the economy. So I think personally that is the bigger factor. A lot of home sales has to do with confidence in the financial markets, confidence in the job markets, and obviously we're going through a period of time where that confidence has stalled.
At the higher end of the market, let's put on our Robin Leach lifestyles of the rich and famous. The higher end of the market, even here in Rhode Island, Narragansett property sells for $4.45 million, announced last week by, I think it was Residential Properties. Delman announced a couple weeks earlier that Edith Wharton's house sold for over $8 million. And if you peek at the real estate section of the Wall Street Journal, there's some fabulous Hampton house going for 20 or 30 or 40 million dollars, it seems like, every day. Wealthy does not seem to be impacted very much.
Yeah, and I think there's many reasons why that is. It's a very interesting time in the high-end market and in the lower-end market. And I think that the luxury market not being affected as much has to do with really just buying habits and also the capital of the buyers. It's a smaller niche of individuals that buy that type of home. I don't think that that's a necessity buy for most of these people that buy these high-end luxury homes. It might not be the only home that they own. It could be a summer home, could be a vacation home. So I think the buying habits are a lot different in the high-end market. And I think in that market, the homes that come up into that level, to that price range, are few and far between. So if the potential buyers see that property out there and they love it, I think they jump on it regardless of what's going on in the economy. Obviously, if they have the resources to do that. So I think there's obviously many factors to why the high-end market hasn't been affected that much, but I'm thinking that has to do a little bit the buying behavior and the resources of that potential buyer.
It's going to be interesting. You see a plethora of ads by the higher end realtors, both in the Rhode Island market and in the New York market, trying to target those areas to keep kind of the momentum going into the spring, into the summer. Everybody has aspirations in what they're buying. Let's go to the lower end of the market. Is there activity there?
Yeah, the lower end market, the numbers were released in Rhode Island for March, and year over year, transactions were up a little over 1%, which I think surprised a lot of people. I think that has a lot to do with the fact that March closings represent January, February purchase contracts. So in January, the real estate market was functioning normally before this pandemic hit. I think where we're going to see more of a pullback is in the June, July market, because usually properties that go into contract in April or in May close in June and July, and that activity we're all expecting is going to be down. One of the interesting things that was recently released when I did a search through MLS for all the properties listed in Rhode Island, well, actually, I had a friend supply these, Don Parsons, a broker at Anytime Realty, but he supplied some figures that were interesting, having to do with current inventory in Rhode Island. So in 2019, the last day of March, there were a little over 5,700 properties listed. Fast forward to 2020, now at the end of March, it was 5,500. So the inventory is lower this year than it was last year. And the other really interesting thing is the average days on the market right now for a property, from market to pending or market to under contract, the listing to under contract, is only 59 days compared to last year at 66. So we're still in a low inventory market. And if I had to guess, and this is a guess, I think we're going to see that inventory mark go down and down the longer this pandemic continues. And right now, there is a 2.5 month supply of inventory in Rhode Island, which is one of the lowest levels it's ever been. So I think these factors are what we all feel are going to fuel the real estate market once we come out of this pandemic. Question is when.
Yeah, and I mentioned to you before we came on the air, Aaron Wren, one of the top urbanists in the country, was on yesterday, and he formerly was at the Manhattan Institute and has a long history of citations for awards and his thoughtfulness. He said, look for an influx of New Yorkers, who, especially upper middle class, who can do their job from anywhere. We've already seen that over the past year or two on the east side of Providence and some other areas in the state, more affluent areas. But he said, look for a big move there going into Providence. Providence is considered a hot, cool city by New Yorkers. It's the next size down that they're looking for. And you may see, listen, even if it's 3,000 New Yorkers come up into this region, that's a significant demand on the housing market here in Rhode Island.
Yeah, agreed. 3,000 would be a very significant mark in the housing market. And, to your point, I think your guess is right on in the fact that individuals in these cities, especially if they can work remote, are looking at properties here. Property values are a fraction of what they are in New York. Property taxes are a fraction of what they are in New York. So there's a lot of good reasons to move. And I'll say one other thing, kind of jumping on the point that you just made. There's also a lot of reports and talk about individuals that rent now that are going to be motivated to buy, because we've seen the last 3, 4, 5 years in areas in Boston, New Jersey, New York, all of these luxury apartment developments that have unbelievable amenities. But what is the problem? If we emerge from this with a continued fear of being around people, these are individuals that might consider buying instead of renting because they don't want to be, around everybody on a daily basis. So if you take that piece, if that does motivate those buyers, and then you have the New York homeowners, the Boston homeowners that also feel the same way, we could see a huge influx of new buyers that we've never really dealt with in this market.
Let's go through a couple scenarios. I'm a homeowner. I've had my house for 10 years. Maybe I refinanced once over the 10 years. Should I be talking to mortgage companies right now?
Yeah, you should, for a couple reasons. First of all, it depends what your mortgage balance is, how much do you have left, and what is your interest rate. There's no real handbook on when you should refinance because everybody has different needs. A lot of refinances that we're actually doing now have to do with term reduction because the most money that you can save is by cutting the term of your mortgage. So we have people that are in 30-year, 25-year notes looking at 15-year mortgages. Although the payment does usually go up, you cut off so much of your term savings over the life of the loan. In addition to that, even if you don't cut your term, a lot of people that bought homes in the last couple of years didn't put 20% down, and many mortgages that people are paying have PMI, mortgage insurance. So because of the real estate market and because of all the home appreciation in the last 24 to 36 months, there might be an opportunity to refinance and get rid of that mortgage insurance. And the other factor is, the home appreciation, which I just spoke of. Year over year, single-family homes, the appreciation went up over 13% in Rhode Island, which is a very, very strong number.
Let's go through the other scenario. Listen, we're a couple. We had a starter house. We're about to have our first child. We've got to get out of this house. We are not a cash buyer. We can put down the 20%. Should I be looking now, even though there may not be much inventory, should I be, and thank God we haven't gotten laid off yet, should I now be looking at getting pre-approved so that I can enter the market in as strong a position as possible?
Yeah, the pre-approval is always the first piece, and a lot of people that are in the market, they want to go look at a house first, and a really good realtor will tell you, before I show you a house, I need you to talk to a financial institution to see what you're pre-approved for, to make sure that you're comfortable in this price range and comfortable with the mortgage payment that's put before you. So it's always a good idea to get pre-approved. Pre-approval usually doesn't cost any money. We don't charge anything for a pre-approval at Northpointe Bank. And a pre-approval just really prepares you so that when you're ready, you can enter the market. So definitely a good idea. The yin and yang of where the market is now on the buyer-seller side, we're in a low inventory market, which means sellers, it's still a seller's market. So sellers are getting a good amount of money for their property once it comes to market. So if you own a home, it's a good time to sell. You might be buying into an appreciated market, but it balances out if you have a property to sell on the other side.
Right. Last word from you. What should people be doing?
People should be listening to our leaders, listening to the federal government. I think that we've had some good news over some bad news in the last couple of weeks. It looks like sentiment has turned a little bit. I think everybody's cooped up and ready to go out there and support the economy. We do have a lot of confidence in the housing market. We're emerging with low inventory, and we're emerging with lower interest rates, which are two huge indicators that we will emerge into a strong market. So everybody out there, stay positive, follow the guidelines, and hopefully we'll be out of this. And I'm hoping in 30 to 45 days we get back to work, but we'll see.
Zach Levesque from Northpointe, thank you as always, a bastion of housing and real estate and financial knowledge. For everybody else, 12 o'clock, Michael Fine, 1 o'clock, Governor Raimondo, 3 o'clock, Professor Jennifer Lawless. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk soon.